I decided to give a shiur today about Birkat Kohanim, and that is because this week's parasha, Parashat Naso, the longest parasha in Chumash, has in it many things, but amongst others, halachot and stories. We have, not really stories, but we have the Birkat Kohanim that we so famously know. Now I would like to discuss a few questions regarding Birkat Kohanim. Let's start with the topic that I chose on the Daf Makorot, which is Nisiat Kohanim b'chutz la'aretz ve'eretz Yisrael. As we all know, one of the main differences between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz la'aretz is Nisiat Kapayim. In Chutz la'aretz, in Ashkenazi communities, Birkat Kohanim is only done on Yamim Tovim, and in Eretz Yisrael it's done every day. And let's try to understand why that is true, what the sources that back up this very, very strange, different of minhagim. I'll say strange because we're about to see that there's really hardly any source for this, and it's a very, very peculiar situation in which no one really understands why this came to be. And let's understand something very basic. We're going to start by saying that there is no real difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz la'aretz in the halachic discussion. Meaning, the real machloket about this has nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael and Chutz la'aretz, but rather with Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. It's a machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah whether or not Birkat Kohanim is done every day, which should mean that today in Eretz Yisrael, Ashkenazim, who follow the Ramah usually, should also follow the Ramah here in Eretz Yisrael and not do Birkat Kohanim. Meaning, that's where we're starting from. How that developed, we'll talk about that later. But originally, the machloket has nothing to do with Eretz Yisrael. It has to do between Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. I always like to I like to be a little bit obnoxious sometimes. When I as a rabbi, it's always fun. But you know, sometimes we are so convinced and we're so used to certain things that we don't realize that we don't go, Ashkenazim don't follow everything by the Ramah. We really don't. The same way Sfarim don't follow everything by Shulchan Aruch. There's so many things that we you know, one thing comes to my mind right now. Most shuls in the world are makpid, right? After Baruch Hashem Ga'al Yisrael to do what? In the morning, what? To do what? Not to say Yisrael. Why? Not to say Amen. The Ramah says you say Amen. Right? The Ramah says Ga'al Yisrael, Amen. You're supposed to say it out loud and say Amen. It's the Ramah Mefurash. Now, in every Ashkenazi community I've gone to, they all go Ga'al Yisrael, they mumble, right? They mumble. Why? So why is that true? That's another maybe discussion of itself. Why that's true? But it's the Ramah that says you do say it. So we don't go by that. Why? That's a good question. But all I'm saying is, it's not always. It's always interesting and to see our minhagim that we do. Not always do they follow exactly what the Ramah says as Ashkenazim, and this is a very good example. But let's understand why is this true. Lichora mitzvat aseh mideoraita, to say Birkat Kohanim every day. And why does the Ramah think that we should mevatel this mitzvah every day? So if you look, sorry. Well, that's what the Rambam thinks. The Rambam says very clearly that there's a mitzvah aseh to do Birkat Kohanim. He brings it down from this week's parsha. That there's a mitzvah aseh to say. We'll get back to that in a few minutes because you are right that you can challenge that what I just said. Now that's why I said lichora. I said doraita, but it's a machlokes rishonim. But I would say that the common understanding by many is that it's the oraita, and that will be also the pshat. Is a bracha that is said by the Kohanim. And the question would therefore be, not the Shulchan Aruch's position, but rather the Ramah's position is what we need to understand. So if you look in front of you, this is the Ramah. The first source on the page is actually the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, who says, Nahagu bechol midinot elu she'ein nosim kapayim ele b'yom tov. Right? He says that's the minhag. That we only do Birkat Kohanim on Yom Tov. Why? So here's what the Ramah suggests the reason being. Mishum she'az shruim b'simchat Yom Tov v'tov lev hu yivarech. He says that there's a simcha on Yom Tov, which creates simcha, and you should make a bracha only when you're happy. This is even in Shabbat we have no simcha. Now, as you know, that's correct. If you ever want to read about this, my Abba in his book, I wrote a nice little chapter about Yismchu b'malchutcha shomrei Shabbat. Is there a mitzvah of simcha on Shabbat or not? What does that mean? But for our discussion right now, there is no mitzvah simcha on Shabbat, as there is on Yom Tov. The mitzvah simcha of Yom Tov, b'samachta b'chagecha, we learned that it mentions 3 times in the Torah, and we take for each regel the mitzvah of simcha. What does the mitzvah of Simchat Yom Tov create? What are the nafkaminas of Simchat Yom Tov? So that's great. People always do that. You're right. We always think about food. That's great. So we always say basar v'yayin, which is machoket rishonim. If that's true or not, because according to some rishonim, it's only when we have the Beit HaMikdash and we eat korban shlamim, then there's a mitzvah d'oraita of eating meat. I just saw that and one of the weirdest things in Judaism is this really bad minhag of eating milchiks and shavuos. In my opinion, that's everyone can know. Everyone's opinion is I have the bit right now, so I can say that. I think that's why we have 7 days after Tashlumim, just to liraga from that. But seriously speaking, it's very strange because you just said yourself. What is the first thing you said about Simcha Yom Tov? You said yourself, basar v'yayin. You said that yourself. So now suddenly on Shavuos we eat milchiks. So what's this idea? So I saw that in the name of Reb Chaim Brisk, they say it's so. I saw it quoted that he says that's why we eat milchiks, to show that you don't have to eat meat d'oraita on Yom Tov. Yeah, you see, or that's a hechitimti. That's muchiach that is not really chiyuv d'oraita today. It's only in times of the Beit HaMikdash. So you can argue with that in so many different ways, but the real nafkamina of Simchas Yom Tov nowadays is of course avelut. We have no avelut on Yom Tov. The mitzvah of Simchat Yom Tov overrides and annuls avelut, which Shabbat doesn't. There's no mitzvah of Simcha on Shabbat, and therefore Shabbat avelut continues. There's avelut on Shabbat, but on Yom Tov there's no avelut. Yeah, but there's still avelut. The avelut doesn't stop, because if that would be true, then we never have a shiva. Right? The word shiva wouldn't be real shiva. It would always be broken. But
at least for Kohanim, there are still signs of avelut. A Kohen in his year of avelut for a parent does not duchen unless he's the only one or one of 2.
That's not true.
It's not in Eretz Yisrael.
In Eretz Yisrael, Kohanim duchen in the avelut.
Yeah.
Not in Florida.
Chutzars, they don't duchen. They don't never duchen anyway. Right. You're right. So what's nafkamina? I'm saying in Yom Tov, you mean?
Both my parents died before Shavuot. Okay.
No, in the shiva that you don't. In the shiva you don't duchen.
In the year.
In the year, I never heard that minhag. I'm not aware of that minhag.
In Chutzlar.
In Chutzars, maybe. Okay.
I am.
This is just proving more and more that Chutzars nagim are terrible. Okay, fine. You just bring it on, But let's go back a second. So the Ramah is suggesting a very interesting suggestion that the mitzvah of Simchat Yom Tov has another nafkamina. That's when we do Birkat Kohanim. Well, now it's beautiful, but as we say in Hebrew, ma kesher. Who says that Birkat Kohanim needs the Simcha? Where?
I'll bring you the sefer where it says this.
Who's
not the Simcha can't do it for Simcha. Does not duchen.
I mean, that's what the Ramah is saying right now. But where is he getting it from? What's the source of such an idea? The Charetz mitzvah in the Torah, the Birkat Kohanim. Who says that there's a mitzvah that you only do on Yom Tov? And he says that meaning there's a special simcha. Meaning you're saying to me maybe that if he's an avelus, maybe you can argue about that. I don't know what that source is, but maybe. But on a regular day, you need tosefet simcha to do Birkat Kohanim. Yeah, because Yom Tov. He said on Shabbat you don't. On Shabbat you don't do it.
No, but no matter what day it is, you do it. You have to do it for Simcha.
So do it b'simcha.
Okay.
Do it b'simcha. I'm sameach right now. Do it b'simcha. Well, I mean, like I'm saying, oh, we don't do serious. We don't give tzedakah if you're not Yom Tov because you're not sameach. Why? Where do you get it from? So he says, "Shetrudim." Listen to this. Shetrudim be'erurim al michiyatam ve'abiltu melachtam. People are very busy. They're tarud. They're busy with their business and their parnasa. Ve'afilu b'yom tov ein osim ela b'musaf. Only b'musaf. Why? Because then you're leaving shul. It sounds very bad, right? Then you're leaving shul and then you're happy. I know he doesn't mean that, but it sounds as if, when are you happy? When you go out of shul. By the way, it's not a joke. The Shulchan Aruch says that in Yom Tov, we're supposed to daven quicker than in Shabbos. Because people need to go do Simchas Yom Tov. It's interesting, right? So anytime you have a friend that is a chazan, you say you're machmir. You show him the chumrah of the Shulchan Aruch to finish quickly. But this is we'll soon see that the Ramah had this idea, and other people suggested other suggestions like the Ramah, but it's on the Ramah as if to prove that this would be a reason not to do Birkat Kohanim. Now, right away, the Mishnah Berurah here points out that this is not the minhag. This is 20th century. Mishnah Berurah is 20th century. Mishnah Berurah already tells us that be'eretz Yisrael u'b'kol malchut Mitzrayim haminhag lisa kapayim b'chol yom ve'aposkim kirsu leminhagam. Right? The poskim said shibchu et haminhag hazeh. They said it's a good minhag. Now, that minhag is the Shulchan Aruch. Let's be clear. The Shulchan Aruch Paskins rules that Birkat Kohanim is done every day, and why not? Meaning davening every day. You daven every day. You do Birkat Kohanim every day. There's no reason. I guess it's Egypt at the time. What was it called? Malchut Mitzrayim. I wouldn't be surprised if you meant the Ottomanian whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if he called it for some reason the Ottoman. I don't know why though. It's a good question. Why would he call that Malchut Mitzrayim, not the Turks? But I'm guessing that's what he meant, but I don't know. So, and I'll prove my point even more. I'll prove my point. I saw an article somewhere that suggested 15 to 20 reasons why we don't do Birkat Kohanim in Chutz La'aretz. No, I'm saying it. I said why Ashkenazim. Obviously, I said Sfarim do. I said Sfarim do. Why? So, for example, let's go. If you flip over the page to the Bet Yosef on the top. So let's go back to Bet Yosef. Rabbi Yosef Cairo himself quotes this minhag, not to say Birkat Kohanim. Again, this is not to do with Eretz Yisrael Chutz La'aretz. This is Bichlal. The idea not to do Birkat Kohanim every day. Nish'al ma'ari molin. Lama eina Kohanim nosim kapem b'chol yom. Machar shemitzvat aseh. Meaning, we have already testimony that 500-600 years ago, there already was a minhag not to do it every day. Well, this is not a new minhag. The Bet Yosef says that he quotes Ashkenazim that said that we don't do it every day. Be'ishiv mipnei sheminhag kohanim litbol mikodem. Says there's a minhag to go to mikvah. This is a totally different reason than the Ramah brought down. Apparently, there's a minhag for kohanim before Birkat Kohanim to go to mikvah. Do we have any kohanim here, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard this minhag?
No.
No. Good. Okay. Kemo shekatuv ba'agot. But I think you should take it upon yourself now. Kemo shekatuv ubechol yom kashelem litbol b'choref. And it's hard for them to go to mikveh every day in the choref, right? It's like when they make fun of men. When they make fun of men when they have a cold, it's like giving birth, right? Women do it. Women go to mikveh. Even in the Choref, and they went into the rivers, but the Kohanim, it's a bit too hard for them to go to the mikvah in the Choref. V'lachein Allah minag dafke b'yom tov. Why dafke b'yom tov? If it's hard to go to mikvah, why yom tov is easier? I don't know. So I think he's saying something here. So I think he realized what my question right now, because he adds v'gam mitam bitul milacha. It's that people are not working on Yom Tov, so they have more time to go to mikvah, which means that in the middle of the week to go to mikvah, no one has time. You got to get to work. That's what he's suggesting.
But they're not working on Shabbat either.
Sorry?
They're not working on Shabbat either.
I'm actually trying to, like you, trying to question what's going on here. I'm not trying to back it up. And he ends by saying, by the way, I don't know why. I think I cut the next piece. I'm sorry, but the next piece, the Yosef attacks this minhag and says, I don't understand. Who said you have to go to mikvah? What, this is a made-up minhag. The Beit Yosef says, I never heard of a minhag to go to mikvah before you do Birkat Kohanim. So to say you're machmir to mevatel mitzvat aseh, you go into mikvah and because of that you can't do a mitzvat aseh deoraita. He said it's a bad minhag, wrong minhag. Should do Birkat Kohanim every day. That's what the Beit Yosef says, and that's what Shulchan Aruch paskins. You do it every day. So we already have another reason here. If you look on the bottom of the same page, you'll see the Kolbo, another later Rishon, or who collected the different minhagim and halachot. He brings another idea. Ve'ena minhag ata la'asot nisiyat kapayim ela v'shabbatot v'yom tov. You notice that? He adds Shabbat. He says, we do it on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Interesting. Not only on Yom Tov. Why? Torach tzibur. People want to go to work. People want to leave. Right? As men that go to shul every day know exactly what I'm talking about. That who have to go to work to get the 6:40 train or whatever it is, and they're pressured to go. So Birkat Kohanim adds another 2 minutes. I mean, that's what it sounds like, right? Torach tzibur. The Chatam Sofer, much later. We're talking already. We're talking about 18th century. The Chatam Sofer says, I'll give you another reason why we don't do Birkat Kohanim in today. He says, "Ein safek she'ein avodah ritzuya v'pigur chat v'shalom, v'gam Birkat Kohanim lo tachol al hamidbarachim az. והיות בעוונותינו הרבים כל ימות החול טרודים על המחיה, הכלכלה, ורוב התפילות בלי כוונה וטרדה מרובה, תפילה בלא כוונה כקורבן שאינו רצוי, על כן מברכים ביום טוב. That's when people have kavana. He says, we know that tefillah is a korban, and when you give a korban and you have the wrong thoughts, in the world of korbanot, the korban is pasul. So if you do Birkat Kohanim without kavana, your Birkat Kohanim is pasul. So on Yom Tov, people are more relaxed to have kavana. So by the way, if you take the Chatam Sofer seriously, maybe we should only daven on Shabbos for Yom Tov too, right? Because he says that we don't have kavana every day, and he says people don't have kavana normally, and therefore it's worse to daven. You know, you can write a book, by the way, of how to explain why religiously you shouldn't be frum. You know those reasons. You know, like, right? This is one of them, right? Oh, a korban. It's worse to daven have a kavana. It's pigo. Also, I won't daven, right? That's almost like what he's saying, right? There are a few good examples like that. Sometimes I have, as a teacher, I can tell you students always make up the best reasons, and they explain to you why it's wrong for them to do the halacha or the mitzvah, because it would be being a hypocrite or it would be right. So they explain with like a lot with the thumb, why the mitzvah doesn't apply. So this sounds like we're too torud, and our tefillah is pasul, so we shouldn't do it. He also mentions, right, the tirda, the lo kavana, a little bit what we saw before, but yet it's very strange. Now, because of this, that it's a bit strange and it's not very convincing, we have amazing stories. I'm sure you've heard about them. How Jews in Chutz La'aretz, good Ashkenazi Jews, said enough is enough. We're going to do Birkat Kohanim. We don't understand this. And if you go over if you flip over to the front page, you will see but there's so much written about this. I just got a few snippets here on the page. There's a book called Aliyot Eliyahu, Stories of the Gra, and look what it says here. Kama pe'amim hishtokek hagra lahanig bebet hamidrash shelo gam bechol. Not bechul, by the way, not bechul, but bechol. In the middle of the week, according to the Gra said, as you know, the Gra was a totally independent posek. He wasn't Ashkenazi or Sephardi. He was the Gra. The Gra did what the Gra thought, and the Gra thought that there's no reason to mivatel mitzvat aseh, and he wanted his Kohanim to go up to the Duchen every day. V'lo erev libo la'asot ma'aseh. But he was a bit nervous to do it. עד שפעם אחת החליט בדעתו שלמחר ייסעו הכהנים כלפיהם. He decided that's enough. Tomorrow morning we're duchening in the shul. והנה באותו היום שחשב זה נתפס בבית האסורים. He was arrested. The Gra was arrested, which shows you that he was a chassid. Not only the Balatanya could they brag that he was arrested, but the Gra also was arrested. As you know, only great rabbis are sit in jail. How do I know that? Because I don't know. I'm being taped now. I have to be very careful. Okay. Years ago, I had some time on my. I was walking by King David Street, and I had a few minutes to wait. I was waiting for my wife in the corner there, and I saw this big Pinto Center. You know what Pinto Center is? Mm-hmm. There's a Pinto Center. Yeah. So he was a rabbi who's the chief rabbi of Morocco today, who sat in jail for fraud or something, money. So he has these centers like around. So I went inside and I see this guy sitting there, and I said to him, "Tell me, is this a Pinto Center, the Rabbi Pinto that sat in jail?" So he said, "Yeah." I said, "You're his like chassid?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "But the man's like sat in jail." He looks at me and says, "So did Yosef?" and then he goes, "And the Maamar of Rothenburg, and the Baal, and the Rebbe in Lubavitch, and Rabbi Akiva, by the way, sat in jail, right? And now the Gra sat in jail." So I really thought, oh my God, my Rosh Yeshiva never sat in jail. It must be like on your CV. I guess it's like a big thing. Anyway, but the Gra apparently was arrested. I'm sorry, I'm skipping here. And therefore, there was a machloket ben Arab vekel de Vilna. Apparently, there was some kind of machloket in Vilna, and he got arrested. ולכן אף כשיצא מבית האסורים לא רצה לקבוע מנהג זה. Can you imagine? The Gra, the rationalist, okay, he was a Kabbalist, the Gra. But the Gra saw this as a sign from heaven that he shouldn't do Birkat Kohanim. And if that's not enough, look please in the Aruch HaShulchan. Before that, the Meshiv Davar, the Netziv. B'zechuni shamati mipi chotni HaGaon Ma'aritz Agon of Beidin de Volozhin. I think that we're talking about Reb Chaim's son. Shepam achat yiskim Rabbeinu Hagra lahanig nisiat kapayim. He quotes the same. So there's a parallel testimony from the same story that the Gra wanted to do Birkat Kohanim. Ikvu min hashamayim. These are all. I'm quoting right now the most rationalist Litvak rabbis of the 20th century, of 19th century. We're talking about earlier the Gra. We're talking about the Netziv, the Gra, Reb Chaim. We're talking about the Aruch HaShulchan soon. We're talking about the first line of Litvak, rabbis who all were scared to do Birkat Kohanim. It's an unbelievable story. Look at this. Ready for this? The third line. Reb Chaim Mivolozhin. הסכים ביום אחד שביום המחרת יצווה לישא כפיים ובאותו לילה נשרף חצי העיר. And the Knesset, but that's famous. Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner, we only have Nefesh HaChaim and a book on brachas of his, Chut Mishulash, whenever we have something like Nachashon, we have something on brachas of his because all his books burned in the famous fire of Volozhin. And they're now saying that this fire happened because of the attempt to do Birkas Kohanim. And that Reb Chaim Volozhiner saw this as a siman not to do Birkat Kohanim. I remember that in camp where I'm in America, where I work in the summer camp Stone, one of the directors, he was Israeli, wanted to do Birkat Kohanim, and I told him, listen, but it's all made out of wood here. all the bunks are made out of wood. I don't know if that's a good idea. If it wasn't good for the Gra and Reb Chaim Volozhiner and all those people, I don't know. I'm not playing with fire here. So. And then the Aruch HaShulchan, just to prove this to you, the Aruch HaShulchan, who is one of the greatest poskim of all times, of the 20th century for sure. What? Yeah, but I'm saying he's considered to be one of the greatest poskim. Oh, it didn't Nachon. And he says, look at this. He says, Mekublani, I highlighted it. Umekublani sheshnei gdolei hador. I think he's referring to Reb Chaim Volozhiner and the Gra. בדרוש לפנינו, כל אחד במקומו רצה להנהיג נשאת כפיים, וכשהגבילו ליום המוגבל הזה, נתברבל העניין ולא עלה להם. ואמרו שאומרים כן מן השמיים נגזרה כן. They saw this as a gzera min hashamayim, not to do Birkat Kohanim. So it's mamash this kind of case where they don't understand the reason. Gdolei Olam wanted to do it because they really thought it doesn't make sense. And min hashamayim, they felt that Hakadosh Baruch Hu showed them that he's not happy with them doing Birkat Kohanim.
But it seems amazing that you deliberately broke a mitzvah asay.
That's right, and we don't understand why. That's what we're saying. We don't understand it so much. Now, by the way, just for the fun, on the bottom of the page, there's a beautiful to read this. There's a beautiful description of Birkat Kohanim by Reb Noton Adler. He was the Rav of the Khatam Sofer, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a beautiful how he and the Baal Hafla, one was a Levi, one was a Kohen, and they describe this beautiful. It's just written beautifully how they went to wash their hands on Yom Tov, and how it was like a whole thing. How they felt it was such a beautiful thing. In Frankfurt, and they asked him especially to come for Shlosh Regalim for Birkat Kohanim. Now it's very interesting because in Chutz La'aretz, I know that people make a big thing out of Birkat Kohanim and Yom Tov. They mamish come to, it's like almost like Yizkor, almost as great as Yizkor, which is the greatest invention of rabbis of all times, to make people think that you need to go to shul for Yizkor. Anyway, but people still ask today, well, I can't go to shul. How do I do Yizkor? You just say Yizkor. Right, but Birkat Kohanim is a real thing that you need a minyan. So people take it very seriously, and they have nigunim. People have nigunim for it. Here in Israel, if anyone does a nigunim for Birkat Kohanim, they shash them up. They're not happy with it. In Chutz La'aretz, it's a much bigger thing, and which is something interesting and special. I have a friend who Talmid Chacham, when he goes to America, he has a mother that he visits in America. So he's a big tzaddik. So he always goes to Sephardi shul after davening to hear Birkat Kohanim. He doesn't want to miss Birkat Kohanim in Chutz La'aretz. I don't know if you ever I don't know if you ever went to a Sephardi shul in Chutz La'aretz where they do Birkat Kohanim. It's like it was very funny. I was once on a plane that stopped in Germany, and we davened. We had a minyan in the airport, and there was a Israeli kid who said Birkat Kohanim, and people didn't understand what's going on. You're Chutz La'aretz, and he said, "What do you mean? I don't understand what that means." And so what I want to understand then, therefore, is where does this come from? And what a suggestion might be to explain this whole thing is I read an article by Rabbi Nachum Rabinowitz, the Rosh of Malay Adumim, who I'm sorry, my mistake. The article was not Rabbi Nachum Rabinowitz. It was Rabbi Elchanan Samet, who was a Rebbe Malay Adumim, was a very famous Tanakh teacher and scholar. So he has a whole article about this, and after he really goes through he goes through more sources than I did about really trying to understand the reason for this. He concludes that the only way to really understand this would be to argue that Birkat Kohanim is not according to everyone a mitzvah deoraita, but it could be a chiyuv derabanan, and I'll explain. The Rambam, I started with the Rambam. I said the Rambam says very clearly that there's a mitzvah d'oraita of Birkat Kohanim every day. And the Rambam counts a mitzvah in the Torah, one of the Taryag mitzvot, of Birkat Kohanim. However, the other moneha mitzvot, the other Rishonim who count mitzvot, have different opinions. The Bahag, from the Gaonim period, he counted as two mitzvot. Two mitzvot he counts in his list of Birkat Kohanim. And I think the Rastrag, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't even count it. What's going on here? What's the issue? So why would there be two mitzvot? Let's ask. Why would there be two mitzvot of Birkat Kohanim? So there could be two possibilities. One possibility is that Birkat Kohanim has two different mitzvot, one on the Kohanim and one On the kahal, the midbarchim. Already in Sefer Charedim it appears this idea that you must have kavana. You, the midbarech, must have kavanah to be yotze Birkat Kohanim. He's motzi, but you're yotze. You have a chiyuv as if to hear Birkat Kohanim. And there's two mitzvot, but which by the way can create interesting nafkaminas about having for example, some if a Kohen made Birkat Kohanim in Shachris, can you go to another shul and do it again?
Yes.
Why isn't it Baal Tosif?
You're giving
Oh, so it could be that if you say, could be. I mean, there are different ways of looking at this. But one possibility is to say that because that guy saw the chiyuv to hear it, right? Right? Nachon. So one could argue that even without that Baal Tosif, but you can argue about this. There's different ways of perhaps looking at this. But that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is to say, and this is a very old idea that people developed this and spoke about this quite a lot, is that there's two halachas in Birkat Kohanim. One is din b'mikdash and one is din b'gvulin. One is din outside of the Beis HaMikdash. That there might be two different types of Birkat Kohanim. Originally, Birkat Kohanim, as it's mentioned in our parsha, was done in the Mishkan, was done in the Mikdash. That was part of the avoda of the Kohanim. To do Birkat Kohanim. It was part of what they did. Today what we do is, when we take it out of the Mikdash and we do it in our tefillah, just like tefillah is korbanot, like we just mentioned before, so is Birkat Kohanim, part of the avodah of the Mikdash. So it could very well be that people suggest that perhaps there are two halachot here, there are two different mitzvot that are maybe even different. One is in the part of the avodah that is done in the Beit HaMikdash, and perhaps there's a mitzvah that stands by itself to do it outside. And how could one argue that? So here you can go into a whole discussion, which people do, which is how do we find that that's really true? Let's look into the halachas of Birkat Kohanim. Do the same laws that apply to Kohanim during the avodah apply to Kohanim during Birkat Kohanim? For example, the avodah has to be done standing up. Can Birkat Kohanim being sitting down? What about these are machloket poskim? There's a machloket of Magen Avram and Taz and other poskim who argue about blemishes. If a Kohen has a blemish, so he's patur for avodah, he might still be kosher for Birkat Kohanim. Why? Oh, so this would make our argument strong. That we would say you're right. There's two different halachas. For the Beis HaMikdash, there's certain criteria. For Birkat Kohanim, there's another criteria. By the way, no one here suggested. I thought someone would scream at what you didn't, which is good because it shows that you. Does a Kohen have a? No one suggested that perhaps the Kohanim don't have a chazaka to do Birkat Kohanim, because that right? Because someone might suggest that why can't a Kohen do duchen today? Because he has no chazaka, the bracha levatala. That would make sense because on Yom Tov. By the way, people suggested that. People did suggest, and I didn't even bring it because it's such a very strange explanation. Because then on Yom Tov we couldn't do Birkat Kohanim either. As you know, a Kohen needs to have a chazaka to be a Kohen. For example, if people discuss a lot, why aren't we building the Beis HaMikdash tomorrow morning, or now? Why are we building the Beis HaMikdash right now? What's stopping us? Besides some mosque there. But let's say that mosque would go away. What's stopping us to build the Beis HaMikdash tomorrow morning?
Waiting for permits.
Waiting for permits. Yeah, that would take a long time. What?
2 months.
Oh, so one of them would be that maybe we don't know what Kohen is. We need a Kohen Miyuchas to work in the Beis HaMikdash. So why? So for example, we all know that a Kohen can't eat truma today. We give our truma to where? To the zoo, correct. We give it to the zoo. Why? Because the zoo today is owned by Mr. Cohen. As you know, a Cohen can give truma to his animals. So the biblical zoo in Yerushalayim is owned by a Cohen on paper. So they can give all the truma to the animals. It's a very strange thing. I have a friend who's a rabbi of a kibbutz up north, kibbutz Shluchot, and they made a deal with Tirat Tzvi. They have a carrot factory. And they made a deal that all the truma of the carrots go to the cows in Tirat Tzvi until they realized that all the livers were coming out orange, and they had to stop it. But that is so a Kohen cannot eat truma. His animals can. A Kohen today can't eat Truma, so why can you do Birkat Kohanim? Why can a Kohen do Birkat Kohanim? Why Kohanim today we don't marry Kohanim to a Gerusha. So that's good enough for that, right? So you can say, oh, that's a suffix, but Easter. But why can you Birkat Kohanim if you're a Zar? If a Zar gives a stranger, foreigner, not a Kohen, gives Birkat Kohanim, it's an Avera. That's why some people, by the way, are very makpid not to give Birkat Kohanim to their children. Exactly that. You know that. The famous the Gra used to, Torah Tzmima quotes this about the Gra that you have to put only one hand, not two, because you put two hands on your child, then you may be imitating Birkat Kohanim if you're a Zar. That's the whole question about if you're not a Kohen, can you do Birkat Kohanim and pronounce it? So we're into that today, that we all give our children. I grew up. I don't remember my father giving Birkat Kohanim or brachas at all. A very Litvak family. Maybe I'm starting too much therapy right now. But anyway, I didn't grow up in a family that gives brachas. But today it's very common. But people do discuss this question about giving a Birkat Kohanim if you're not a Kohen. So why today? Because the answer is that there are different levels of chazakas. There are different levels for a Kohen. Beis Hamikdash, for Truma, we need a very, very good chazaka. Birkat Kohanim, we can use a less chazaka, less of a cheskas kehuna today. But that's a famous discussion. What level of chazakas do we need to for Kohanim to perform certain rituals or to be considered a Kohen?
If doing the bracha on the child, it's not doing it the same. The hands are not held the same way as Birkat Kohanim.
What? Putting both hands.
On the head.
Putting both hands, but putting both hands together is what Kohanim do. There's a Torah Tzmima. Look in the Torah Tzmima on this week's parsha. If between the aliyahs, okay, take a Torah Tzmima with you to shul, and you'll see that the Torah Tzmima on this week's parsha brings like a story there about how the Gra was makpid not to do it, something like that. We'll only put one hand. It's in the footnotes of the Torah Tzmima on this week's parsha. So that's not an issue, right? Because chazaka wouldn't be an issue. However, to argue that there are two different types of mitzvot, one migdash, one bigvulin, is a possibility. And the next possibility would be to say that some Rishonim perhaps think that there's no mitzvah nowadays to do Birkat Kohanim because there's no migdash. And that's opinion of Rabbi Emden. Rabbi Emden in Morvik Tzia. Rabbi Emden from we're talking 18th century. 18th century Germany. As you know, he was one of the great. He was the son of the Chacham Tzvi. He was one of the major poskim at the time in Germany, who had a very big fight with Remington Eifschitz at the time, who was also a very big Talmid Chacham, if not greater. He was considered to be one of the greatest minds of the generation. They're buried next to each other. That's what I want. Is that true? I don't know. Everyone says that. I want to go and see that. I don't know.
I'm going next week.
You going where?
To Hamburg.
To visit their graves?
We were invited because of the second generation of Shoah.
Oh, are you going to go to the cemetery?
Yeah, I asked to go.
Oh, so take a picture, please, for us. Okay, great. So he suggested that Birkat Kohanim now is the Rabbanan because there's no Beis Hamikdash. So Rav Elchanan Samid suggests that he says all these reasons, they're nice reasons, but it's very difficult to argue that they would justify bittul a mitzvah aseh. They could, however, explain of why we're postponing it Rabbanan. Tirda, right? Busy, not having kavana, not having time, being cold outside, whatever it is right now, are reasons that they sound more reasons to postpone it Rabbanan. And therefore he says that it could be that the origins of this minhag are based upon a psak or an opinion, which we find in Rishonim, not very common, but we find that Birkat Kohanim outside the Mikdash is the Rabbanan. That of course would explain beautifully why the minhag is on Yom Tov. Because you could argue that in Yom Tov it's a Zecher LaMikdash. What's Yom Tov? Yom Tov is the day of Aliyah LaRegel. Yom Tov is, unlike Shabbat, is the day which we celebrate in the Beis Hamikdash. The focus of Yom Tov has always been Beit Hamikdash. So one could argue that part of the Zecher HaMikdash, of remembering the Mikdash was the Birkat Kohanim, Dafka on Yom Tov. Meaning that could explain why Dafka on Yom Tov. But to explain even more, it could now explain perhaps why the minhag in Eretz Yisrael has become to do it like the Ramah. Now, what is that based upon? Why in Eretz Yisrael do Ashkenazim today follow Sephardi minhagim? And everyone does Birkat Kohanim. What else, by the way, do we do? Like Sephardim? All of us here in Eretz Yisrael, everyone does the same. In what area? In what other halachot? We say Ein Kelokeinu every day. We say Marit Tal. Sim Shalom. Tachanun. What, in Chotar you don't say?
The longer.
In Chotar you don't say longer Tachanun? Oh, okay. The biggest change, of course, that we do here is we don't put on tefillin on Chol Hamoed. In Chutz La'aretz, who put on tefillin here in Chutz La'aretz and Chol Hamoed? Ashkenaz? No, you guys didn't? When you were really? When you grew up as a kid in Chutz La'aretz, you put on tefillin every day. You put on tefillin every day.
Until I came now,
Then you were told it was wrong. Okay, fine. But
today, that's not the case in many communities. That they do not put on tefillin.
Many people do though.
In Cleveland, virtually nobody put on tefillin.
Really? That's a minhag. That's a minhag, right? They made it to argue about it, but in Israel, unheard. Sorry. Okay, but in Israel, it's unheard of. Okay, why? Why all these minhagim? By the way, one other minhag you forgot. Another minhag, we don't say that addition after Ashkivenu in Marv. In Israel, no one does that. Right? No one does that. Why?
Doesn't that come from?
What do they all have in common, those minhagim? What they all have in common is the Gra thought they were correct. And when the Gra's Talmidim came here to Eretz Yisrael in early 19th century, the Gra's Talmidim created the Kilat Prushim. They went to Tzfat, and then they went to Yerushalayim, which, by the way, is fascinating because we have testimony that in Tzfat at that time they installed Birkat Kohanim. Then they left Yerushalayim, and then Tzfat went back to stop doing Birkat Kohanim. And then Yerushalayim, they brought the Gra. These are all Minagei Agra that have become Minagei Eretz Yisrael, which, by the way, is fascinating by itself. It's fascinating because we know that the Kilot developed their own Minhagim, but we have Minagei Eretz Yisrael that are based upon Minagei Agra, that Ashkenazim and Sephardim all do the same. And this is one of them, Birkat Kohanim. Now, but I read Rav Shari Yeshuva Cohen, who used to be the chief rabbi of Haifa. He was chief rabbi of the Air Force, and he's also Rav Goren's brother-in-law. He was a son of the Nazir, Rav David Cohen, the Nazir, and Rav Shari Yeshuva was a Cohen, of course, Cohen. And he went up north once, and he saw that up north in Israel people wanted to do Birkat Kohanim. There's still people up north, kibbutzim, that weren't saying Birkat Kohanim every day, that kept the Yekeshe, or they brought with them the Yekeshe minhag from Germany or something like that, and they didn't do Birkat Kohanim, and he came out against them, and he convinced them, sometime in the 70s, something like that they should do Birkat Kohanim.
Minhag HaMakom.
Eretz Yisrael?
Exactly.
Well, why is that true about that, not about other minhagei? Rav Adi Yosef says that minhag HaMakom in Eretz Yisrael is everything Sephardi. That's what he says. Rav Adi Yosef argues that every Jew makes Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael should take upon themselves all minhagei Sfarad. He says Rabbi Yosef Cairo was the Mar Da'atra of Tzfat. He was the rabbi who established the minhagim. And by the way, for sure, Rav Avad Yosef is correct in the halacha of when you move to a city, you take upon yourself minhagei hamakom. It's a Gemara, it's Mishnah Masechet Pesachim, that you take upon yourself the minhagim. The fact that Am Yisrael never kept that law is fascinating. And why is that true? It's a fascinating discussion. Why did Jews move with the minhagim instead of adopting the minhag that they came from? So this was discussed. When was it really discussed? In the expulsion of Spain. After the expulsion of Spain, when Jews started traveling as communities almost, and they just said they Yotzei Sfarad be whatever it was. Yotzei that developed into what we have today in Yerushalayim. And one street in Yerushalayim we have Algiers, Tunis, Morocco, Poland. What is this? This probably started from the expulsion of Spain, how Jews started taking with them the minhagim instead of taking upon themselves the minhag hamakom. And yet, minhag is sometimes stronger than any rational. And minhagim Eretz Yisrael in these areas, minhagei agra became very, very powerful in Eretz Yisrael. And it's dynamics that you can't. It's not rational dynamics, right? It just happens. That's the beauty of minhagim. Yes.
Minhag agra today is the Talmidei agra doing the opposite of what the Gra did?
The Gra tried, but he believed in it. The Gra thought you should do it every day. Right? That's what the Gra thought. And he tried to do it in Chutzart, and there was a fire, and he got scared, but he thought it was the correct thing to do. So his Talmidim did it, and it worked. I mean, unless you want to talk about the fires, I don't know. But it worked. So now we can say, now if you want to say that behind this is one now could argue that perhaps there's something deeper in understanding of the Birkat Kohanim of Eretz Yisrael. I found a piece of the Ger Rebbe who who talked at the last source on the second if you flip over, he talks really about how the real bracha is only in Eretz Yisrael. All brachot are now. Of course, this is the fact after the fact that we have such a minhag. Now we can explain in a Kabbalistic kind of understanding why is it that this minhag developed only in Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, I don't think this was the reason why they decided this, but now that we see that the minhag did only develop and took roots in Eretz Yisrael, we could really understand that it's a country of Kadosh Baruch Hu. The real bracha of Hashem is only Shoreh be'Eretz Yisrael, and the Birkat Kohanim that the Kohanim give us is Birkat Hashem. Birkat Hashem is really only applies as if in its fullest in Eretz Yisrael. So that could explain perhaps again after the fact why it was established in Eretz Yisrael. But like I said before, Rav Samit is very convincing to me, at least when I read his article, that all the reasons that we get, and by the way, I was always taught if anything is given more than 3 reasons, it's usually because none of them are really, really powerful. I found, I think, 15 to 20 reasons which people try to explain why there is no Birkat Kohanim Chutz La'aretz. So many people try to explain it, and almost none of them are convincing. And therefore, I think that to argue that perhaps the origins of this minhag was the opinion that it's the Rabbanan, and therefore the reasons could explain perhaps for the Rabbanan why they didn't do it. I do think that makes sense to me. Is that the truth? I don't know, but it makes sense to me. But the fact remains that here today in Eretz Yisrael, the norm is to do Birkat Kohanim every day. You mentioned Avilut, so you should know that this is a minhag that's also argued in Eretz Yisrael today. Do we do Birkat Kohanim in a Shiva house?
Yeah, Minhag Yerushalayim.
So Minhag Yerushalayim is we do. Minhag Yerushalayim is that we do. So you could now I don't know if this is the reason, but you could argue that there be where I live in Alon Shvut, we don't do Birkat Kohanim in a Shiva, but in Yerushalayim we do. You could argue. Maybe I'm making that. Maybe Minhag Yerushalayim is based upon the idea that this Makom HaMikdash. Makom HaMikdash is really where Birkat Kohanim is supposed to be done. Yerushalayim, being the city of the Mikdash, would justify that it overrides as if Avilut, and say that we always do Birkat Kohanim in Yerushalayim. Yes. Correct. Right. So right. So that was what I said. I hinted to that when Rav Shar Yeshuv went up north, he was Rabbi of Haifa. He saw that minhag and he tried to change that minhag. He mamish went against it and tried to convince people to change it and to do minhag Eretz Yisrael of doing Birkat Kohanim every day. So I have a few more minutes. Yes, Bakasha.
A related question. Why is the bracha ba'ahava?
I actually I heard one. I once heard about. I heard something about this once. I don't remember right now. There is an answer or answers. I just don't remember right now what it is. Yeah, I don't.
I think the ahava was added afterwards because they have to do it with love. If you're not going to do it with love, then don't do it.
Yeah, but the question is why? What's the source for that?
I have a small sefer at home. It's called Birkat Kohanim.
Okay. I actually edited a book. My brother-in-law, Rabbi Shalom, was a Kohen, and when he died very young, we put out a book for him called La'amodu L'Sharet, articles on Kahuna. So there's an article there about Birkat Kohanim there, but I don't think we talk about that there. But there is such a. I have to look it up. I did think though, just we have a few more minutes, just to mention one or two things here about Birkat Kohanim. Besides Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael. And that is it's a share of itself, and I don't have much time to do this, but as you know, the Gemara says that a Kohen who kills someone cannot do Birkat Kohanim, because the same hands that killed someone are not able to give the bracha. And the poskim discuss what does that mean if Chas v'Shalom a Kohen does someone b'shogeg, if in a car accident he kills someone, or of course. In war. That's a very famous question. For those who didn't buy my book yet, so in my book, I have a chapter about this, about Kohanim doing Birkat Kohanim nowadays. And this question first started becoming famous after World War I. In World War I, there were Jews that came back. That was really the first time the Jews ever fought. As a group, as people, and they came back from World War I, and we have tshuvas from early 20th century of Rabbanim who were asked these questions about Kohanim doing duchening, and the tshuvas that we have, they were lenient about it. They allowed them to duchen, and their main argument was that it's honest. They are forced to kill. They're forced to go to the army, which, by the way, is not so simple. Just because in Western countries Jews volunteered to go to World War I, in some countries they mamish couldn't get fast enough. It's hard to believe that places like England, in Germany, Jews as if you couldn't run any faster to go and what's the word, enlist it just looking back, it's hard to understand, hard to believe that Jews rabbis encourage the youth to go to fight in such a battle war. I think at some point when people realized that World War I is just one big killing field and no one knows what they're fighting for, and so I think at some point they woke up. But it was just. I mean, World War II is one thing, but World War I, be'emet, hard to believe. But to say that we will be honest, and then they also said that in war you never know if you never really know if you killed someone. Okay, that's of course not always true, and so they were makel about it. And then the next well-known tshuva that I know of that discusses was after Yom Kippur War. Aviad Yosef was asked by Chayalim, and it makes sense why, because the Yom Kippur War I think was also the first time that a mass of religious people fought in a war. People, 6 Day War, there were religious soldiers too, and as well as 48. But the idea of Hesder, the first Hesder units that fought were Yom Kippur War. So it makes sense, but I don't know if that's the real reason. And Rav Aviad assured them that they could do Birkat Kohanim because he said in World War I perhaps they were honest, but these boys are doing mitzvot for fighting and saving Jewish lives, and that would not be considered to do something, a reason not to do Birkat Kohanim. Interestingly enough, in Rav Shechter, in his book of Nefesh Harav, quotes Rabbi Soloveitchik giving a shir about this, and Rabbi Soloveitchik was not as easy about this. He hinted that perhaps even Chayalim should not be doing Birkat Kohanim. People like to say, "Oh, you see this Chutz La'aretz versus Eretz Yisrael." People like talking about it. I talked to a certain rabbi, I won't mention his name, who told me that he was in that shir of the Rav, and he doesn't think that that's what the Rav said. So I wasn't there, so I don't know what the Rav said and what he meant. I think that Rav Soloveitchik many times, according to my father at least, said certain things that you could take different ways. And so this rabbi that told me this, I do trust him very, very much. But at least Rav Soloveitchik pointed out that obviously the effect of killing someone really is obviously something that we should be that we have to understand. It's not just a halacha, can you do Birkat Kohanim or not, but really the effect that it has on a Kohen who's supposed to be a man of peace at the end of the day, of Birkat Shalom. The Birkat of Shalom is Birkat Kehuna, and how does that fit exactly with a Kohen whose job is to do the opposite? I'm not saying, I think halachically it's easy to say that you're allowed to, but obviously we should be aware of the price that we all pay for going to war. L'tza'areinu. Obviously, there's no other choice, but l'tza'areinu, that is the price that we pay nowadays for going to war. But I just want to mention that that's like that's a very interesting question that nowadays is out there, and I do think that we should be very sensitive. Here where the post game, I think, have to really, like Rabbi Aviad at the time, really give that assurance to the soldiers that they could do Birkat Kohanim, because to make them feel that what they're doing is correct, and that we're behind them, and that we think what they're doing is moral and correct and right, and that we have their backs, and that we will be willing for them to do Birkat Kohanim for us. I think that's very important that in that Shuvah, our Kohanim hear that. Tov, everyone. I think this is. I won't see you, I think, for some time, because do they take a break here at some point? I guess a summer break. Right. I'm off. I'm off for the next few days to travel the world a little bit. I won't be here for a few weeks, so I don't think I'll see you till next year. So have a good summer and be well.
So in this area last summer, and in this area there's a shtibolah, daven for Shabbos.
Yeah.
And in the shtibolah, the main Ashkenazi minyan in that building, there was a big sign which said clearly, whatever, we do not do Birkat Kohanim in Shachar. But by Musaf, they did. But only in Shachar.
Okay.
You still go to Camp Stone?
Yeah.
My grandkids are there.
Oh, okay. I'm going there this summer, please, God.
Yes.
I'll tell you.
Shoshana Green is working in the baby kitchen.
Okay, I'll try. I'll look at which month. You know which month she goes?
First.
Oh, I'm second. Sorry.